Welcome to Impact the World, the show for and about creatives, changemakers, and entrepreneurs. This is a conversation episode where a special guest shares with me what they are creating and the behind-the-scenes journey of their experience. Hello, welcome to today's episode of Impact the World, and I'm thrilled to be bringing to you the holistic psychologist, otherwise known as Dr. Nicole LePera. I came across Nicole's Instagram page at the recommendation of a friend, and immediately she was somebody that I was just thrilled to see out there doing the work she's doing with the brilliance and the way that she is doing it. So if you're not familiar with her work, I think you'll enjoy this episode. Really, what happened for Nicole was she was trained in clinical traditional psychotherapy, but she was finding limits, and she has worked over the years to pioneer new methods and ways and tools to empower us and to bring our mental, physical, and spiritual health all under the microscope in equal focus. So enjoy this episode, and if you are a fan of the show and you enjoy what we produce every week, we would be delighted if you would leave us a review, rate, or subscribe over at Apple Podcasts. Thanks so much and enjoy the show. Hi, before we start the show, I just wanted to let you know that we are about to begin my flagship annual course, Rebirth. It begins on January 19th and runs through to the 29th. So you can join anytime in that window. It's 6 live classes, and I will be channeling my guides, the Z's, and leading you deeply into your work and your life here as a creator. We can't wait to get started, and we'll put a full trailer at the end. But if you wanted to check it out, you can go to rebirth2021.com. We hope to see you there. Nicole, it is an absolute delight to have you on the show. So thank you for saying yes.
It is truly an honor, Lee, to be here with you and connecting with your community here today.
Well, I'm curious to see how many of our community already know you, because you have a very sizable following, and Instagram is where I first found you. And I've shared this with you personally, but it was my literary agent who I was having a chat with, and we were talking about my next book and all that kind of stuff. And she said, "Have you seen The Holistic Psychologist?" And I was like, "No, I've not heard of The Holistic Psychologist." And she went, "Oh my God," she went, "you would love her. She's amazing." So I went and saw your Instagram page, and just what hit me about your work was not just the clarity and the understanding and the depth that you bring, and the very clear dedication to your mission. I mean, that's all over everything you do, which I always love seeing. It's the pioneering element. I think, I got excited because I was like, oh, here's a pioneer. Here's a total pioneer in our field. And I think the work you're doing is so needed. And then it was hilarious that about 3 days afterwards, I happened to get an Instagram message from you. So it was a delight because I was like, oh my God, brilliant. Now I can ask you to come on the show. So thanks.
Of course, I'm truly honored hearing you even use that word, Lee, of pioneer. Your work has been known to me for quite some time, as has a lot of people's work, I think, outside of my more traditional field, which I think really encapsulates my own evolution as a human, and obviously, in the field of healing, if you will. So I'm honored to, like I said, to be actually connecting now.
Well, what I really love about what you do, because, if the way I look at my own work and my own healing path, it has been very much spirituality and personal development and the marriage of those two. So the very metaphysical spirituality, especially, of course, being a channeler and that being a big part of my own teaching. But then I was a real personal development workshop junkie in my late teens and early 20s. So what I recognize in your work is the traditional that you talk about, which is fantastic because traditional psychology has so much to offer us. And yet what I love is that you're bringing in, from my perspective, the deeper emotional understanding that was often missing when I would go to traditional psychology 20 years ago, for me, as someone who felt a lot, had a lot to work out about my emotions and like how I would deal with them. And so I'm curious how you got started, because I know that you traditionally went into clinical psychology at Cornell. Is that right?
Yeah, so I did my undergrad at Cornell in psychology, whatever the age is, probably around high school. Intuitively, when one is beginning to be asked, what are you going to be when you get older? For me, coming really from a fascination with wanting, or a desire, I should say, wanting to understand other people, you would have probably start to hear me use the word psychology, and I want to be a psychologist. So I was one of those weirdos that entered my undergraduate degree already with my declared major, because I did have my eye on having that practice. And what my initial intention, at least, was to help others to become aware of themselves, obviously aimed at, I think, mapping onto your path, personal development, aimed at allowing them to create change in their life. And it was through extensive, clinical experiences working with individuals in all different populations, in all different treatment settings, learning all different ways and tools to work with people, culminating, of course, in me finally opening up the private practice, hanging my shingle, to be really disempowered, ultimately, if I'm speaking honestly, and really stuck right alongside of a lot of my clients. So my own pathway, as I think a lot of us, journey about, in terms of first starting in self, originating with me trying to figure out, why am I so stuck? Why am I unable to create and sustain change in my personal life? Let alone, why am I not able to help, the clients that I'm being now paid to help? Really opened up a lot of doors, opened a lot of awarenesses, and I believe gave me a more complete understanding of why we're stuck and how we create change. And I think the complete understanding comes when, in a way, we go back to what psychology once was, where we did at one time believe in that spiritual entity, right? That indescribable psyche, soul study of. And I believe we also really got off track where we more or less deleted our physical body, and all of the levels of dysregulation that I think a lot of us become trapped in. So again, my own path of self-healing, self-realization, I believe really informed me to now work what I call myself holistically, really honoring the wholeness, the physical, emotional, and spiritual aspects of this human experience, and obviously then harnessing that to truly help people create change.
Mm. And so how did the kind of path out of the traditional practice into kind of pioneering your own stuff happen? Because I imagine that's also complicated, because
Yes.
you have to be very careful when you're working in traditional models and you've got certifications. I know there are very strict rules around all of that stuff, because I've got many friends who
Mhm.
are, therapists plus very spiritually minded. So yeah, how did that journey take place for you to kind of start becoming who we know you as today and the work that you do today?
There's, I think, two layers of definite complications that I've experienced and continue to experience. And there's the personal layer of just me, and all of my internalized beliefs about the psychologist that I imagined myself I would be, about the way I would practice. I had a lot of my identity more or less wrapped into my old way of thinking about myself as a human, and again, myself as a healer, that shifted and changed. And then there was obviously the complicated journey of when I made the decision to go online, which was really influenced with two major intentions. The first was to begin to speak a new truth, which, like I was going to say, had its layer of professional complications. How will it be to be out as a professional, saying, these new truths, speaking this, perhaps suggesting that we have that more incomplete knowledge, and obviously urging and sharing some tools to develop a more complete understanding. It was also really motivated by a desire to connect with other humans a bit more truthfully or authentically. So when I made that decision, for me, both personally and professionally, I had those challenges. I was a human who did not make a habit of speaking my truth, for many different reasons in my personal life, in my personal relationships. So going online and even sharing about myself, as a lot of us in the field are taught not to do, was an exercise, for me in standing in my more human authenticity amidst many viewing eyes. And then obviously, like I said, there was the professional side of things, walking through, which was layers of challenge, of questioning my own truth. And obviously then by proxy of putting the truth out there that other people can call into question.
Yeah. It's so interesting hearing you say that because, in about 2007, I had a radio show with my then partner, and it was called Invitation to Remember. And we were both channelers and emerging spiritual teachers. We kind of just started a few years earlier. And we got a lot of kickback because we would speak about our human stuff, which to me was so important, like to bridge, okay, here's the higher self that channeling can bring you into and can open you into the overview. And then often you catalyze some human stuff for healing. And that's how I was experiencing life. But we got a lot of kickback from people in the then channeling community because you weren't supposed, they were like, just get out the way and channel. I don't want to hear about you. And they were kind of missing the point of what we were trying to do, was to show that when you're on a healing path, and if you are putting energy and intention toward healing, for me, it was often so powerful to hear the stories of other people and to hear how they'd got through it. And so I've always found that I understand why in traditional psychology, and for the boundary of that professional relationship, why that kind of is there. But at the same time, as someone who has many times experienced the power of our sharing with each other as being so healing and unifying, it's an interesting rule that's there.
I couldn't agree more. And I think often about what comes to mind is a puzzle piece, analogy, and really cultivating, because it is very difficult to stand in one's truth, though the value of that is having a multitude of puzzle pieces of different languages, of different ways that we just slightly tell possibly the same thing. You'll hear me often say, the things I'm saying aren't new, right? I've read this before, I've understood it. I'm just a new channel. I'm saying it based on my own past experiences. And so puzzle pieces always come to mind, which is that is the most beautiful, collective experience we can have, is when each of us feel safe enough to speak our truth through our channel, allowing those that resonate to sift through and pick the pieces that can better inform their own journeys to their own creation and self-expression. And then obviously to empower themselves to leave the aspects that don't. Yeah.
It's funny being with you here. What I'm loving is the power of your mind, because it's so evident. I'm sitting here looking at you, talking to you, and it's just, you have this, it's really strong. And of course that makes total sense given your ability to distill, structure, and give us frameworks around what could otherwise be complex, and really boil it down for people. I'm curious because I know that anybody who has such a powerful energy in this part of their body also has a really strong, or a potential to develop, intuition. And you just mentioned the word channel. And I was curious, what's your experience when you're creating this work? Do you feel you go into a very conduit state, even though I know you'll be drawing on some stuff that's perhaps more grounded or researched, or I'm just curious about that for you, being in your presence today.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I think so interestingly, I'm going to take what you said, the power of the mind, and talk about, I think, just quickly the flip side of it. While I've always believed I've had a connection to my intuition, the way it speaks to me is in feelings, in a knowing sense. That's, I believe, what sent me down the journey to be the psychologist. I didn't know where, there wasn't a moment. I didn't even have it in my mind. I just kind of knew. And I've had many moments of that in my life. However, those up until I, began my own healing journey were overshadowed by me spending time in my mind in an unhelpful way, right? By the way I think a lot of us are living in that monkey mind, or are looking to solve problems or to find our path to touch those inner things. And we're going about it from up here. So what I've now learned to harness is part of the realization I came into in my own healing journey was how much of a disservice living in my mind. While it had value in terms of my performance in school, it also allowed me to stay comfortably away from a lot of the deeper feelings that were too overwhelming for me at one time. I came to realize, quite simply, I was dissociated. Now, understanding that and learning how to, be more embodied in a conscious way. Now, the way I understand, the channeling that I do is I enter very much so a flow state where I'm fully present. And that's when a lot of the times I'll create the content for wherever it is I'm putting. So for me, what that feels like is pure, intense presence. And that's how I understand my version of this channeling.
Yeah, so beautifully said. I think so many of us identify with that. I was just saying with a friend the other day, God, the amount of time in my 20s, particularly my early 20s and late teens, the amount of mind looping I used to do to try and solve something or to try and get somewhere. And, it was perfect because it was who I was, it was where I was, and it was part of my journey. But yeah, I don't miss that phase of life. Yeah. I'm curious for you, because you mentioned going out there online and making a conscious choice to go out there online and speak your truth, and that was a jump for you. How have you experienced what I would sometimes, I would call it the psychic energy of being exposed to a large group of people through an online platform? Others might have a different word for it. But for me, I'm always curious about that psychic energy for anybody who is exposing themselves to a large number of people. How has that been for you? And what were the adjustments you had to make to allow that relationship, because it is a relationship, into your life? Like, what have you noticed?
Yeah, I think of it very much in similar terms, in terms of psychic energy. I think the patterns and that which I speak to, I think in my daily content, is evidence language I use of the collective unconscious. And that's why I believe the account has taken off, because speaking in this more collective way to these collective truths. I mean, Lee, there's community members from all around the world. So that resonance I understood as the increasing numbers, people who are like, yes, you're speaking to me. And that me could be pretty much, anywhere around the world. So the value, I used to be a clinical psychologist in a small practice in Philadelphia. So I had the people that came in and out of my office to study in this way. Now, right, I have the collective unconscious. So I empower myself and I use what I see or what I witness in terms of the patterns and in terms of teaching and in terms of distilling these tools. I use kind of collectively what I'm seeing in response from a kind of cognitive way, though diving down to more answer your question, energetically, it does take a toll, just like relationships outside of Instagram and our virtual worlds take a toll. Obviously, at scale with millions, I don't have millions of people in my personal life as friends. Yeah. This, amplifies it. So I'm speaking this very intentionally for a reason, because what I've learned, and I'm still learning, is how to use boundaries or how to protect myself energetically when it does begin to feel a bit overwhelming. So being really conscious about just things, that I think a lot of us should be, conscious about. Screen time. How much time am I spending online? What am I doing when I'm online? And for me, as someone who creates and puts out content, what is my relationship with everyone's opinions about what I'm saying? And in all of those areas, I'm still, finding my way through, because on my human side of things, I'm someone who historically struggles with boundaries. So, understandably, learning how to actualize boundaries at this scale has been an ongoing conversation. So again, what that means for me is paying attention to how I'm affected and what energy I'm carrying away from these exchanges with the mass collective. And of course, modifying or amending or taking care of myself, stepping away even at its extreme when I need to, just like I would do, or I practice doing in my personal relationships as well.
Yeah. And it's interesting because I think everything you've said, perhaps someone watching or listening doesn't have a work page on social media, but a lot of people have personal pages. And I think the same rules apply because it's still so new to all of us. Mm-hmm. Unless you're very young right now, we're all, 10, 12 years into this mm-hmm. social media, massive amount of voices, massive amount of opinions, and what it does to you as we're in the infancy with this experience. It does really train you around boundaries, and it also really reveals to you your wounds. Like, that's the thing I learned very early on. The comments, and this is like, 2006, 2007, the comments that would horrify me or would hurt me or would, then I would have to go, oh, hang on a second. Oh, why did that just go off in my ribs or my stomach? Or, it took me a moment to figure that out, but it's like, oh, okay. And then also, now I give myself permission to feel what I feel. Like just a few weeks ago, someone left a not very nice comment. And the comment, what they said didn't bother me. But I was very clear. I was like, this person is not welcome in my world or in my universe, because I would never behave that way to somebody. So I think it exposes so much about our behavior as a collective and the kind of ease of sat behind a computer keyboard versus, or would you say that to that person's face in that way? So it's this weird, like, truth telling and not very truthful telling as well. We're in this, it's going to be interesting to see where we're at in a decade or so after this whole era of social media.
I couldn't agree more. I think the anonymity of it, I think the group think that can very, quickly happen, really limiting ourselves to only one belief system, which then we become frenzied at defending. And you're right, this is incredibly new. We're not equipped with the endless stimulation that's available. And then obviously with all of the complications, I think this very unique year where a lot of us are spending more and more now time online because our jobs exist virtually, because we're home all of the time. I think, again, this just, it continues, right? This cycle of our wounds are going to be projected on the internet, and the way we cope with those wounds, the internet becomes another tool for good and bad, quote unquote, even though I don't love using those distinguishing, adjectives.
No, but I know what you mean. I kind of feel the same way. Someone was saying that the other day. They were like, oh, well, the internet's just bad. And I was like, God. And I literally walked them through like 6 things about the internet that had changed their life. And I'm like, I said it, like everything, it's complicated. And it's how you feel that day. It's where your focus is. It's whether or not you're annoyed at something you've just seen, or whether or not something's just helped you, So yeah, like anything, mixed bag. The reason I'm glad that we're talking about this is I actually pulled something up from your Instagram page. Now, we're recording this kind of near the end of November in 2020, and I know it won't come out until early 2021, but a couple of weeks ago, in the middle of all the US election kind of hysteria and craziness that we were seeing flying around, you posted something to your community, and I'm just going to read what you wrote, if that's okay, because I'd love us to talk about it. I thought it was fascinating and very well written. To the self-healers community. Self-healers is one of your hashtags. It's one of your things. We'll talk about that more later. It's clear there are accounts dedicated to creating false narratives around my personal beliefs and affiliations. The past few days, the online harassment has been incredibly intense due to this. I've gotten threats and some of the most abusive messages I've ever received for beliefs I don't even have and never have had. I am not in QAnon. I am not alt-right. I am not for white supremacy or tolerant of it in any way. It's incredibly painful to watch people create stories about things I do not believe and would never support, then state them as if they're my truths. I might have a large following, but I am a human being. I am here for this community to provide free daily tools for healing. There are many very unhealthy trauma-based dynamics that play out via social media, and my focus is on the beautiful people in this community dedicated to this work. It will remain there. We are all in desperate need of collective healing. And I'm not someone who goes on Instagram every day. I don't scroll every day, but about once a week, I'll check in, or the newsfeed throws something up. And because I follow your page, I saw that, and I was 2 things. I mean, I felt for you because I also, I thought, well, that could be me. So I had empathy, for sympathy, all of those things. But I also thought you said something that really needs to be said, not just on your page, but in general, like that awareness, because I feel like the unconscious that gets thrown around. It's interesting you said earlier, I work with the unconscious, because it is the unconscious that often is driving those attack or those judgmental comments. And I think we as a world need to get better, whether it's on our work pages or our personal pages or in a conversation with grandma at dinner, just getting better about saying no and holding up a mirror when people are thinking they can just fling arrows at each other.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I think that for a very long time, you said something that really resonates, Lee, with me, which is, call it my superpower, call it the thorn in my side. But for as long as I can remember, I really had the ability to empathize and to hold compassion, to understand that even when I was, hurt by someone, something, as I found myself, as a lot of us do, as we grow, as we age, as we relate to others, I always had an uncanny ability to put myself right in their position or to imagine what might be driving something that hurt me, that behavior, but from a deeper place. And why I said that it's my superpower and the thorn in my side, because for a very long time, I would allow I would allow myself to okay a lot of behaviors, and didn't have, boundaries that protected my energy. I would essentially simply explain away, and just continue to empathize and show up holding space for what I now imagined was a very hurt human. So I still retain that. And in those moments, I can see even in the most vile comments that I have had, sent to me, emailed to me, all of the things to my team, to my loved ones, right? Separate, hold space. The way I understand that is, here's someone hurting, here's their wound, their unconscious being, right, projected onto me. What I've had to get a little bit, more tight around is that might be the case, and I can still show up in protection of my energy and of my space. So again, that's what I was referencing earlier in terms of how do I show up. I have an uncanny ability to tolerate, if you will, misunderstandings. You can have your belief about me out there, and I can stay over here. I need to continue to hone that protective space, where again, it doesn't infringe. And what started to happen that prompted that is the community started to really feel under attack, in really very negative ways, which is what prompted me to speak on. And I'm happy that you're viewing it as, and I watched a lot of other creators since begin to make similar statements, because I think a lot of us are, becoming that projection object in a way that is really damaging. And I can speak for myself, the dysregulation that, I would fall into, even though I was understanding, was very, very real, emotionally, energetically, my physical body, even. I mean, I had to cancel our previous podcast reporting because I hurt my back. I mean, I understand this again as an accumulation of that energy that I was containing, and it was too much.
Yeah. So interesting because, I think for me, it always boils down to war, the energy of war on our planet that has been perpetuated for so long. And, that there is that kind of energy of war on social media. Your friend says a snippy comment on your personal page about something and you're like, oh, and it's like these little energetic arrows flying around. And I do think we've got a bit of a reckoning time at the moment. Years and years ago, as a channeler, I've shared this multiple times. I remember my guides saying to me in about 2007, 2008, they said, you wait, you'll see this world's going to become a lot more emotional. In about a decade, especially, and beyond, you're going to see this world becoming a lot more emotional. And Pollyanna me was like, oh, how lovely. That's going to be so nice. Everyone's going to be hugging, interpret it how you want to. But I so resonate with everything you said. I have a course called Empaths versus Narcissists, a power dynamic and how to recover from it, because it's one of the specialist areas I kind of ended up working in by accident, but also not by accident, because they were the life lessons I'd been through many times. And that ability to hold compassion for someone as a human is a beautiful thing. But when we're letting them batter us in the face with their behavior over and over again, because we're still holding compassion for their wounds, we're not recognizing that by holding compassion for their wounds and tolerating their behavior, we are creating new wounds in ourselves that they are just cycling through into us that we then have to recover from. So boundaries, boundaries, boundaries. I mean, it's one of the most important lessons. If you truly want to be open in this world, you have to know what your own personal boundaries need to be.
Yeah, I go as far even to say, if you truly want to be authentic as well, you have to know where your space ends, where your limit ends. You have to be in a space where your needs are getting met so that you can then receptively and authentically show up for others and the world. I mean, the title, Impact the World. I mean, we all, I think, desperately want to do that. Whether it's not, it's just connecting more fully with someone else and or having a sense of making, an impact beyond that. Though again, I think we're not able to, because again, we're not safe enough in our own authenticity to then bring it to others or to the world.
Yeah, and I hear you. I mean, I think all of us are learning constantly how to become more authentically who we are today. But I also have never seen such a time collectively. I mean, 2020 is a year for the record books, and yet at the same time, I know I've heard some other people say that, so I'm just parroting. But actually, for me, this is like the beginning. It's like this is the beginning of the major decade of transformation, and you're seeing just this very unsettled reactive energy in those who don't have the tools or don't have the awareness or don't have enough kind of love, support, compassion in their life that they aren't just vomiting their own wounds out in response. So it's kind of why work like yours is so powerful and needed, which leads me to your book, which I'm so happy for you. You did a post the other day sharing a photo of you holding the galley copy of your book, and it's called How to Do the Work, and it will come out in March of 2021. So if you're watching or listening now, you can already go and pre-order. It's already getting a lot of pre-orders, and we're going to put a link not only to Nicole's website, but also the pre-order page so that you can easily find it. But you wrote underneath this photo, blood, sweat, tears, and soul went into this book. I'll bet it did. So tell us a little bit about the blood, sweat, tears, and soul and about the book itself.
Absolutely. I mean, if you would have asked me a decade ago, if I imagined myself to have a book, to be an author, that wasn't even necessarily on my radar. So a lot of this process is really surreal. There came a part, in my journey, and as I began making sense of, what I believe is the more, unified idea of holistic wellness, that the book obviously outlines, showing up day in and day out on Instagram, putting it together. At some point, I came to realize that great tool, love it. It allows me to equalize access to some of these ideas, to some of these concepts, to some of these tools, again, to people who might not otherwise have access. However, it's limited by the square, the caption, and, kind of what we can do with that. So somewhere along the way, the book, then became for me this idea of the full, and a lot of us who like the idea of a comprehensive workbook to live with. So that kind of birthed as an idea, and the gift and the opportunity to be able to put this down and to have this book out in the world in the foreseeable future is everything to me. What I hope it provides people, like I said, is an understanding in the very simplified way that, I speak, that I conceptualize this. I think that's helpful for a lot of us. Like I said, most of these topics have been spoken before. I think a lot of times the disservice that has been done is they were not really translated into practical. Well, okay, that's a great idea. And this happens, I think, a lot too in the spiritual realm and this esoteric way of thinking. Oh, these are great concepts, right?
Yeah.
What does consciousness mean in real life? What does ego mean in real life, right? So the book, I hope, offers what these concepts mean in your real life, giving you an idea, like I said earlier, of all of the ways that we're stuck living again in that repetition of our past. And then obviously opening the door to begin to create a future that's different. So to that end, I found it to be really important that in the book, we talk conceptually. And then at the end of each chapter, there's some exercises, there's some journal prompts, there's translating these ideas into action. And I think a lot of us, and this might be one of the more frustrating places to be, those of us that have these ideas and we can't yet actualize them into change. So having both in this book, like I said, I hope this to be almost a handbook of sorts that people live with, revisit at different times, because the work changes. You said something earlier that I think is really important. We change, right? We are ever changing. That I think might be one of the most difficult truths to embrace as human, the impermanence, the ever evolving nature of us. Though that's why my work, I believe, is about empowering the self. Yeah, I talk about tools. I talk about how to show up differently and create change through conscious actions every day. What we're really talking about, in my opinion, is empowering ourselves to continue to walk into the unknown future of tomorrow that hopefully is different than what 2020 was for us. However, with the confidence that I can continue to navigate life as it continues to evolve in front of me.
Yeah, absolutely. Beautifully said. And it absolutely will be a handbook for people. I have no, as soon as I saw the cover and heard you doing it, I was like, oh, that's going to be such an important book of the next decade. So well done. And how was it to write the book? Because having put a book together and written a book, and also having spoken to other author friends, what surprised you about the book process?
Well, here comes the sweat, tears, and numerous breakdowns of it all. So in general, the process for me felt really kind of pressure cookered. We worked on a very quick timeline so that we could get the book. It's important for me for the book to live in the world. Yeah. I didn't know how long it took to get a book from an idea to creation. So that was just very logistically surprising in terms of, oh, wow, the psychological difficulty of it is challenging in a lot of ways. It challenged, ideas about myself as a writer, as a communicator, even the exercise of retelling and thinking about my story and my healing journey, both my past and my future, brought up a lot emotionally. Even now, reading the book, I just am getting finally out of all of the edit stages, which means that I'm rereading the book and my work. And that is everything from challenging to my ego, and I don't like how it works, and I can't figure out how to word this sentence, to unearthing those wounds, to reading about, that story of me as a child. And I think as a lot of us do, as that comes to mind, then we have that layer of healing as well. So there's been a lot of the book in my personal life, and, the book bringing up a lot of just my daily conversations that I have with myself in healing, and a lot of new challenges. Part of my wounding, probably very surprising to hear, as someone who has an account with 3 million followers, as much as I desperately want to be seen, there's a very little scared girl inside of me that desperately wants to hide. So the book represents that as well. Now knowing that this book is going to go out into the world, quite literally around the world, with my name on it, is thrilling and incredibly fearful, scary.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's funny you say that, because I was just saying this, Stephen and I, my husband, we were out somewhere yesterday, and he said something to me, and I said something to him. I said, well, that's because I like being invisible. And I've always been somebody who, when I'm out in the outside world, I like being invisible. And I think I'm more invisible than I am. And I don't even mean because of the work I do. I just mean in general. Like, I think some part of my brain thinks I'm actually invisible out there. And yet it's ironic to me too. I'm like, oh, here I am, really happy to get to serve the community I serve, and know that the work that I feel compelled to do might be helping them. I mean, that's to me just such a win-win. It's brilliant. So it's a funny thing. We're funny human creatures. One thing I want to say to you, that my good friend Scott Stabile helped me out the week that my book came out, which was last year in March. I spoke to him about 3 days before it did. And you do lots of interviews that get booked for you by the publisher. And so you're sick of talking about yourself and your story, and you're really over it by the time you get to that point. And I remember feeling really weird, like days before the book came out. And I've released stuff publicly for 15 years. And he went, oh, yeah. He said, I went a bit mad when my book came out. And I was like, huh? And it was just the one sentence I needed. It was like a permission slip. Stop wondering what that. I was like, oh, you go a bit mad when your book comes. Oh, okay, fine. That now I can go home. Got Stephen, I'm a bit mad at the moment. He's like, oh, okay. And I'm like, okay, good. It was like I could relax. So brace yourself in March, just in case. But I'm sure.
Well, I appreciate that, because you have all this preparation. You think like, okay, I must be over it. I'll be really grounded and stable. Yeah. And I'm actually thinking of, where will I be? Maybe I should book a little respite. Yeah. Where I can just go crazy on my own, and then come back into the world. So thank you for sharing that.
Well, and also you named this. I think I'm probably not unlike you, I'm a fast creator. Like, especially at this age and having done what I've done for 16 years, I have the muscle now, and I flow, and that's how I keep producing. But I'm so used to things being quick. So, when you're talking about a book and it's like, yeah, we can release this in 18 months. And you're like, huh? You're talking to the public, why does it take 18 months? It's trippy. It's like this whole paradigm of time has taken place from beginning to ending.
Yeah.
So that's surreal too. So Nicole, I love that you have something called the Self-Healers Circle. And reading from your website, you say it's a private, self-led community for those willing to do the work to create lasting transformation. And this was the line I loved. We are a community that thrives on the mindset that you are your own best healer. So tell us a little bit about the Self-Healers Circle and what that entails and when you set it up.
The Self-Healer Circle really began, as most of my creations do, as an idea grounded in what I wanted, what I wished I had. So as part of a healing journey, I'll speak just from my own experience, so I know it resonates with a lot of others. As we become more, step into our authenticity more, oftentimes the relationships, especially the older ones around us, begin to shift and change. And so I, in the process of my own healing journey, began to feel, now much more naturally disconnected from people. And I felt the urge to, the way I would language is find people who got it, who were speaking my language, who were on the same journey that I was on. And so, like I said, one of the main motivators to create the account was to find that community. And then as the numbers began to skyrocket, and like I said earlier, I began to get that indication of how universally resonating this work was, and therefore needed. This work was in the comments, in the messages, people would reflect that loneliness, that searching for others right back at me. So then it became, well, I will always be a presence. Well, as long as Instagram is still here, in terms of the free platform, I think it's really important to have these tools out there. Even my Future Self journal, resisting publishers approaching me, wanting me to print it for income. And I want
and that's something that you offer free on your website, by the way.
That is free.
So
that is a free
Future
journal
Self
prop. I
Journal.
actually just a Future Self journal. Anyone who's interested can sign up for the email list, and that will get delivered to their inbox. I say all that to say, having the accessibility of the platform is always going to be part of my work, because I value that, and I think it's incredibly important.
Same.
The Healer Circle really was for those, and a lot of people would begin to express interest to wanting to dive a little deeper, to begin to action on the work a bit more, and understanding that we are social creatures. We need others. We need relationships. And a lot of us are searching for those more authentic, connected relationships. So intuitively it became, well, let me offer something in terms of that. So the Self-Healer Circle was an idea that obviously then putting the systems in place and getting the team in place and figuring out how to translate that into the virtual community was my brainchild, my project. And when we were able to open enrollment for the first group last November, it was incredibly amazing time. And again, it's an incredible environment. A lot of healers, again, from around the world are in there each month. We cover a topic in healing. So there's a whole virtual library of different resources. And I think most importantly, there's the humans that are walking the same journey, the relationships that I'm watching, in the comment section, in our new portal where we can interact with each other, the relationships that are forming, I think are really impactful for a lot of people in their healing journey.
For me, one of the payoffs, so I think I first started running live workshops, it was 2006, so 14 years ago. So I've done a lot of workshops in various places all over the world in that time. And one of the payoffs for me about running a live event is if I get like a moment where I'm not, the focal point, and I get to just observe people talking to each other or at lunch, it's just heaven to me. Like, especially when we do week-long retreats, you just get this glow inside that that they came for something that you put on, and that that might have been what attracted them. But when you watch the relationships. And I feel the same way online. Like one of my favorite things when we run any courses or we have the portal community, just watching the relationships that form, but the way that people help each other, even if they don't know that, not always in a heavy way either. Like they'll share something funny and a whole group of them will kind of chat and it'll make me laugh. And I mean, that really is incredible, isn't it?
Yeah, I have chills just thinking about that, and something that is really important to me. And I hope when the quarantine lifts and it's a bit safer for us to have it public in-person events, something that I started doing that I would like to continue to be able to do is offer free events, free meditations. And similarly, I offered one here before I even lived here on the beach in Venice. That's now a couple blocks away, which is mind blowing to me, and in Brooklyn. And I would do the same thing, like watching. I actually made it a point to urge, hey, you're all here for this meditation, though. There's people you can relate to, talk amongst yourselves. And that for me lights me up because there's that little lonely girl inside of me that too is desperate to be seen and to be authentically connected to others in my relationship. So I have that with many community members. Many are now part of the team here at the Holistic Psychologist that, began with those connections, those souls speaking to each other and knowing that alignment was there. And I take no same happiness in seeing and in fostering that. And like I said, that's always going to be part of what this is for me. The tool of online breaks down the barriers of access. And I believe and I know that we heal in community, and hearing all of the amazing communities now that I think of it like a virtual city where we all have our little neighborhoods, and you go neighborhood to neighborhood. I'm like, have this whole visual of kind of what this is evolving into in a really helpful way.
Yeah, totally. So we've talked a lot about your work and the things that you're doing and your journey around that. On a day where you're like, okay, I haven't got the juice today. I'm not creating, I'm not producing. What do you do for either reset or relaxation or joy? Like when you need to unplug from what you do in the world, what is it that kind of lights you up? What fills you back up when you feel like you need to fill yourself up?
Well, I will answer this question first by stating that it's very difficult for me to settle in those days. I have that part of me that, has trained myself to produce, that has all of these meanings about what it means when I decide or I need to take time off. So I'm going to answer this question by saying it's not easy. I have that endless narrative. I've proclaimed to my partner Lolly recently that I really struggle to let myself rest. So I've even started to pay attention to the language I'm using in my head in these moments. So I'm going to answer the question by saying not easily, though I'm aware of, my go, go, go mentality. So when I'm able to stop myself, you will find me finding joy in connections, typically in nature. I live 3 blocks from the beach now. That could be a walk to the ocean. Right. And just being present to what is happening there. It could be in nature on a hike. So nature for me really, and that living very dissociatively for so long, nature was always my respite. So knowing for some reason, the chaos of my mind when I was in nature, it just allowed me to be a little more grounded. And now, of course, practicing, understanding how to navigate that chaos, being a little more grounded, having a slightly more quiet mind, I'm able to access that now more regularly. So once I get past my constant go, go, go inner narrative that's telling me all the reasons why I can't rest, I do try to embody and obviously go out and just be wherever that is.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing. And I definitely identify with several things you said. And it kind of took me back a few years. I remember it was a few years ago that I realized it was hard for me to stop, particularly with work, because I kind of, wired what I do into my body so successfully in the last 16 years. And it was a process for me. But one of the things that I realized is I like short periods of rest. And I was getting it all confused in my head thinking, why am I not enjoying this 1 week vacation that I'm supposed to be enjoying? And people are like, oh yeah, I just sit by the beach. And I enjoyed that for like an hour. and I enjoyed it. I enjoyed it for 2 hours if I was with somebody and I was connecting with them. But what I learned about myself was actually I am a worker bee, and that's my design. But if I pepper that with regular moments of rest or change, and they can be very short, but they have to be conscious. So I have to go, oh, stop and be with the cats, because I adore our cats. I adore cats in general. And so that, then I was like, oh, now I'm okay. And actually, weirdly, I feel like I'm more productive now than I ever was when I used to like crash and burn and, learn those hard burnout lessons when you aren't stopping and taking care of yourself. So even though you were sharing your own personal experience, I could hear 1,000 ears watching this show kind of identifying. And I think that's kind of a society disease. We haven't really woven self-care into our society, and equally recognize self-care is going to be very different for all of us, not only based on who we are in our design and our energy and our circumstances, but also, like we said earlier, we're changing all the time. Like we're constantly changing, and so is the world. So you have to kind of keep moving with what's self-care to me now, what's rest to me now,
Yeah, absolutely. And I've even learned, I used to have this idea that to rest, I needed to stop completely. And now I understand that to remain balanced in rest, my rest day more or less starts the same. I still do my morning routine. I'm still journaling. I'm still moving my body. I, like you, I feel like I have a higher energy. I'm a busybody. I'm never going to be vacationing for a week down and out. So even on vacation, I've had to reframe that my day-to-day lifestyle choices I now make to keep me balanced in my center aren't work. I've now had to relanguage that vacation doesn't mean for me, or I don't function at my best by stopping everything completely. So what I say that to say is I have had to learn that my rest days even still look a little different. I still am doing something for my energy typically so that I can remain balanced for myself.
So relate, and I'm sure so many people do. So as a kind of wrap up question for our conversation today, 2020, the year that I think everybody has talked about, discussed, could you share with us 2 things that 2020 gave you? Maybe one of them that you recognize was a gift that you willingly received, and maybe one of them was a little more something you had to come through as in the form of a challenge. So what 2020 challenge and what 2020 gift comes to mind right now as we're here at the end of November?
Yeah. So I think the challenge, just reiterating as, the climate online shifts and change and reacts to everything that's happening in the collective. The continued challenge, I think that 2020 exacerbated and will continue, is again, how do I navigate my presence in that virtual world? How do I protect myself? How do I keep, my boundaries in a way that keeps me in alignment, that keeps me energetically in alignment so that I can continue to show up and to do the work. I think the gift of 2020 that I see for myself and possibly a lot of other people is moving, right, that sphere of empowerment, right, or that reliance on my external life or decisions outside of myself, and beginning to bring it more internal. So what I mean when I say that is the huge pattern interrupt, right, that 2020 has been in many degrees for all of us, right, has challenged our autopilot, that status quo, the way we were operating, that for a lot of us, right, allowed us to sidestep and to avoid or to manage maybe our discomfort or our wounding. And when that was ripped away, again, I think it was that pattern interrupt, throwing us all into this new unfamiliar that's challenging for each of us. However, it also stripped away for a lot of us those external things. To a lot of our challenge, feeling lonely, feeling disconnected, however, required us in a sense to adapt, to find a new way of being or a new way of getting those needs met. And so the way I think about that, right, is beginning to empower the self, that we are incredibly adaptive creatures, in a way that I believe for some will impact a future that's now different, right? It's kind of not allowed us to do the same old things. That again, while for many, it's walking through the difficulty of doing new things. However, it's that personal empowerment. How can I find some space? How can I find some clarity? How can I find a little breathing room for myself? And in my opinion, every time we have that conversation, that's again what I believe this work is about. So I think the gift of it is maybe removing those external reliances, necessitating that kind of internal adaptation toward empowerment. That again will be a lifelong journey for many of us.
Yeah, beautiful. Thank you for sharing. Well, Nicole, you've put a smile on my heart today, having this lovely conversation with you. So thank you. And, you know, there are certain people that just make me happy that they're out there doing their thing, and you're one of those people. And it kind of, you know, it kind of feels like, oh, great, I'm so glad Nicole's over there doing that so amazingly and affecting so many people. So thank you for impacting the world the way that you do. And thank you for being here today.
Of course, and I send that gratitude really wholeheartedly right back to you, Lee. It makes, again, feel less alone, feel a little less crazy, knowing there's other humans in the world that are walking the same journey. So thank you.
Yeah, and I look forward to being in person when everything calm. I'm not even going to say calms down. No, I'm not going to use those words. At some point soon. So, for anybody who wants to connect more with Nicole's work, I would highly recommend her Instagram page, which is the Holistic Psychologist on Instagram. So many helpful tips and tools and videos and charts and ways of looking at your energy, your emotions, your mind. Very powerful, very restructuring, very laser focused. And you can find Nicole's work and where she mentioned her future self journal on her website, which is the.holistic.psychologist.com. And as usual, we will put all the links in the show notes. So whether you're listening on Apple or watching on YouTube, check out the links below the video or the audio, where we will also share a link to the pre-order page for Nicole's forthcoming book, How to Do the Work. So thank you as ever for tuning in to Impact the World. Thank you so much for being with us, Nicole. And lots of love, everybody. We'll see you on the next episode.
Thank you.
Rebirth has been an annual transformation program that I and my team offer every January for the last 4 years. This year, Rebirth 2021 will be quite different to prior years because 2020 was very different to prior years in general as a whole for all of us. So a couple of things came to me for Rebirth 2021. I wanted to deliver all of the modules live. Prior years, we have done a lot of pre-recorded material, but this year, everything will be delivered live, and then there will be full replays available within 24 hours of the live broadcast. My guides, the Z's, are going to be a huge part of this year's Rebirth. We held transmissions in August, and it was an incredible experience, and it was allowing my guides to bring through the next level of information. And one of the themes that they have talked about for 2021 and beyond is us becoming more creators of our lives. They're talking about how we create our lives every day through our energy, and also how we can take different actions to animate our sense of purpose, our sense of connection to life, but also the life and the world that we're creating right now, and how important that is in the years to come. So Rebirth 2021 will have that focus as its main theme, next level creation. And then across each broadcast, we're going to look at creating from a metaphysical and a grounded standpoint. Stephen Washington will again be bringing his work to Rebirth. So there will be a module called Activating Your Creative Body. And as soon as you sign up, you will receive the channeled audio MP3 and sound healing, which is called Creating Through Chaos and Being Here for Love. We can't wait to get started with you. The program begins on January 19th, and you will have lifetime access to the material once we have finished on January 29th. So if you're looking for a rebirth or to up-level your way of creating in your life, we would love to have you join us for Rebirth 2021. You can visit rebirth2021.com or my website, leeharrisenergy.com, for all the details.